Okay, you're going to work out just a few examples with scatter plots and types of correlations here. So our essential question, how can we construct and interpret a scatter plot? So this word interpret is super important that you remember. You've interpreted slopes, you've interpreted y-intercepts. It's finding the meaning of the data. So some vocabulary: scatter plot, positive linear correlation, negative linear correlation, nonlinear correlation, no correlation. We went over all of those in your foldable. And then outlier, gap, and cluster. These are all somewhat new. Outlier you've heard, but gap and cluster are new today. So pay special attention for when you hear the word gap and cluster so you can figure out what it means. Okay, example 1 at the top of your notes sheet. So we have a situation here. It says the scatter plot at the left shows the amount of fat in grams and the number of calories in 12 restaurant sandwiches. So we can see restaurant sandwiches, fat, calories, and then we have all of our data points on here. So question A, how many calories are in the sandwich that contains 17 grams of fat? So 17 is in between 15 and 20. So if I go up, I can see that the only sandwich that it could be is this one here, and that is about 400 calories. If I just follow over to calories. So 400 calories. B, how many grams of fat are in the sandwich that contains 600 calories? So if I go to calories, 600, looks like there's a point right there, and that is 30 grams of fat. Question C, what tends to happen to the number of calories as the number of grams of fat increases? So this is interpreting. So if you notice, our points are kind of rising, which means it's a positive correlation, so that means both the x and the y values are increasing. So we could explain that by saying as the number of grams of fat increases, the number of calories also increases, which makes sense. You can't increase the grams of fat without increasing the calories. On your own one here, I'll read it to you and then push pause and you answer it, and then push play when you're ready to see the answer. So what if a sandwich has 650 calories based on the scatter plot in example 1? How many grams of fat would you expect the sandwich to have? Explain your reasoning. Go ahead and push pause, answer that question, and when you're done, push play. So you would expect about 35 to 40 grams, because if you're at 650, you're somewhere in this area right here. So this would be more grams of fat than a sandwich with 600 calories, but less than a sandwich with 700 calories. Next couple examples here, we're going to describe the relationship between the data, and we're going to identify any outliers, gaps, or clusters. So if we take a look at this first one, we are comparing television size and price. So on the x-axis we have television size, on the y-axis we have price, and we can kind of see that our points are flowing in like a positive correlation and upward correlation. So remember that means both values are increasing. So we can explain that first by saying it's a positive correlation, but then we have to describe it. So we can say as the size of the TV increases, the price also increases, which makes sense. The bigger the TV, the more money it is, unless it's a really ancient picture TV that maybe doesn't work anymore. Outliers, so you're looking for something that doesn't follow the trend of data. That would be this point right here. And so the coordinates of that are about $72,250. Now gaps is an area where there are no points. So right in here, there are no points. So we would call those gaps. Now, it's kind of hard to identify without actually pointing to it and saying gaps. So when you write it down, we can see that, okay, the television size where there are gaps is in between about 30 and 39 inch TVs, or 32 and 39 inch TVs. So there's gaps there. And then clusters, they're all clumped together right around 30 inches. So that is a cluster. Next example, we have age and number of pets owned. So person's age is on the bottom, number of pets owned. And you can kind of see this is all over the place. So there is no correlation. And to describe it, we can say a person's average age doesn't affect the number of pets owned. You could have like a crazy cat lady, really old, tons of cats. Okay, she might be an outlier. But in general, there are no clusters. They're all outliers because if there's no correlation, they're all over the place. And there are really no gaps either because there can be a lot of empty space in no correlation. So there are no outliers, gaps, or clusters. Flip over to the back side. So on the back, you're actually going to make your own scatter plot. We're comparing study time and test score. You need to make sure you put a title on it, label the x-axis, label the y-axis, and then identify any outliers, gaps, or clusters. You should also draw in your line of fit. So go ahead, figure out how you're going to number your x and your y-axis, the scale on it, and graph your data, and then identify the relationship, outliers, gaps, and clusters. Push pause, do that, and when you are done, push play to compare your scatter plot with mine. Okay, so here is what my scatter plot looks like. Yours might look a little bit different depending on how you numbered your x and your y-axis. So you can kind of see my points are increasing here, so positive correlation. So my relationship is, as the study time increases, so do the test scores, okay, which is generally true. The more time you put in studying, as long as you're doing a good job studying, you're going to get a better score. An outlier, though, that we have is this one right here. So this student studied for 110 minutes, but only scored a 70. Maybe they studied the wrong material, maybe they just aren't a good test taker. There's lots of factors that could influence that. Gaps, there's really not a lot of gaps. We don't have a ton of data points, so you can't have a ton of gaps. And then clusters, there are no clusters because they are not jumbled together. Okay, this is it for the notes. So what you need to do is bring your note sheet to the guest teacher and show the guest teacher your note sheet and then get your homework assignment, which you will need your textbook for.